what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. And it is Wednesday, March 15th, 2017, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and another crazy weekend. A lot of stuff going on here today. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer your call. Our third hour guest today will be Joe Moulton, the CEO of Guns 80, following up on that apparently ambush-style journalism from NBC. And right now, the polls are just now closing in the Netherlands, and we're waiting for the first report of the exit polls, of course, because of the way they handle their elections in the Netherlands, where there's a lot of hand counting. They don't trust those computers. The official results may be a few days away, but generally the Dutch exit polls tend to be pretty much bang spot on. So we'll see where that's going. Now, every once in a while, if you live long enough, you will be witness to an epic disaster. The sinking of the Titanic, the explosion of the Hindenburg, the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Towers, and of course right now Rachel Maddow, because she just had this incredible epic fail, and I'm sure somewhere in the darkness Geraldo Rivera is wiping his brow, because up until last night Geraldo Rivera had the dubious distinction of hosting the greatest live TV epic fail in TV history with his secret vault of Al Capone, which turned out to be absolutely nothing. So starting late yesterday, Rachel Maddow and MSNBC started pushing this story that they had gotten hold of Donald Trump's 2005 tax return. Remember all that thing about why won't he release his tax returns? Well, because he wasn't paying taxes. He's a crook. He's dishonest. And they were just pumping it all day long. It was #1 trending topic on Twitter. They just hyped it for hours on MSNBC. Then when Rachel's show came on, she just sort of took up the first part of it with a lot of other stuff, getting people built up for it. Then came back from commercial and starts rambling around. She's got the 2-page summary of the tax return, which shows that, in point of fact, Donald Trump had paid a lot of taxes in 2005. There was nothing there at all. So Rachel then goes back to all of this thing about, you know, we still have to look at Russia helping Donald Trump, and Trump's being compromised by Russia, and just pushing that stuff. Epic fail. Epic fail. Maddow looked like a complete idiot, and MSNBC looked more like fake news, which we already know they are here. But the takeaway from this is actually quite significant, because apparently back in 2005, Donald Trump paid a 25% tax rate, Obama paid a 19.5% tax rate, Sanders 13.5% tax rate, because of that sliding scale. The more money you have, the more you pay in taxes. And everybody went to Twitter. Sean Hannity was mocking Rachel Maddow. Donald Trump Jr. was on there saying, "Thank you, Rachel, for finally putting this to bed," and letting all the Trump haters know that there was nothing to the story from the get-go. It was just more of this campaign propaganda that everybody was dealing in all during that campaign. The reality is that Donald Trump paid more taxes in 2005 than Bernie Sanders did in 2014. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Considering that Rachel accomplished absolutely nothing other than to crater her and MSNBC's credibility, she committed a felony on live TV. Title 26, U.S. Code Section 7213, you are not allowed to take somebody's tax return and make it public. And it's another reminder that the liberal establishment seems to feel that they are above the law, that they're allowed to do these things and not get called on it. Anyway. As I said at the top of the show, the polls are just now closing over in the Netherlands. We're waiting the first release of the exit polls that should be imminent. I'm going to be checking on them during the next commercial break here. One interesting thing already is that there was a high voter turnout and quite a bit higher than 5 years ago. And they're saying it was the milder weather, you know, and all the rest of it. Generally, no. When you have higher numbers of voters turning out, it means people are voting for a change. People who are happy with the current government, they'll basically stay home, and they don't feel that they need to make the effort to get on out there. But people who want to change do make the effort of getting on out there to the polls here. Now, the issue over Obamagate and spying is still going back and forth. Members of Congress are saying that Trump has not provided any hard, convincing evidence that the Obama administration was eavesdropping on the Trump campaign headquarters, even though the White House has not denied, or rather Obama has not denied it, and in fact gone back to justify it, saying we had a FISA warrant because of the Russia connection to Donald Trump, and we know that FISA warrant was acquired through a fraud. Somebody set up a totally bogus Donald Trump website and communicated from that website to Russian servers, and that was the chain of evidence presented to the FISA court to get that warrant. Now, Judge Napolitano is out there saying there is not going to be an American paper trail of this spying, because everybody still remembers the lessons of Nixon and Watergate, and not to leave evidence behind that you're doing this. And Napolitano is saying Obama went through GCHQ in Great Britain using that pre-existing arrangement from Echelon Five Eyes that goes all the way back to the 1980s, where these countries would spy on each other's citizens, then trade the data to get around the laws saying you're not allowed to spy on your own citizens. And unlike the Nixon era, all of our communications are already compromised by the NSA. They don't need to go on in and put physical wiretaps. They don't need to go on in and plant radio bugs. Everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody's got telephones. TVs are watching you. It's just out there. Now, Loretta Lynch, apparently, according to this story in this YouTube video, Loretta Lynch was bending over backwards to find some way to legitimately grant Obama's wiretap requests on Donald Trump. Ron Paul has stepped into the fray saying, look, let's just face facts. They're wiretapping everybody, and they don't need paperwork or signed special orders to do it. It's built into the system. Remember, one of the events that led to the discovery of that huge Israeli spy network in the United States just prior to 9/11 were suspicions that the Israeli company that had modified our domestic telephone system to allow law enforcement to simply listen to any phone call anywhere in the country by tapping a keyboard, Converse Infosys. There were suspicions they had backdoored their own system, and they were basically peeking in on police communications, drug enforcement communications, and tipping off Israeli drug dealers who would amazingly not be at the rendezvous that was going to be raided by the police. And it was investigating that link that led to the exposure of this spy ring, the largest foreign spy ring ever uncovered in the United States of America working for Israel. And that was all unraveling just when 9/11 began to happen. All right, we're going to take one phone call here. Russ in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Fukushima. I've been a chemical engineer for over 50 years, degreed and registered, and this Fukushima thing is really starting to scare me. Let me tell you a couple things. Apparently they're dumping salt water into this reactor somehow, into to try to cool it of some manner. Now, one of the things people don't realize is that stainless steel is tremendously subject to chloride attack. Even stainless, chrome and nickel are eaten up by salt water. The chlorine in the salt water is just fact of the matter. It's chemistry.
Okay, I need to cut in here for a second. First of all, this is wildly off topic for this portion of the show here. But are you sure it's salt water, that they're not using fresh water?
Wouldn't have enough. There's probably not enough fresh water in the whole country of Japan to. I don't know any. I can't give you any specific numbers as cubic feet per minute or stuff of this nature. But to cool a situation of that magnitude, they have to be using a tremendous quantity of water. It's got to be salt water. Where they even get the fresh water from, the deep canals or phenomenal cooling pipes or something of this nature, the ocean's right there. The reason they built these nuclear plants near the ocean is because of the accessibility of tremendous quantities of cool ocean water.
Well, there's no question they were using the ocean as a heat sink rather than building cooling towers on that question. But I think before we go any further on this discussion, I'd like to establish it as a fact that they are using salt water rather than trying to use fresh water over and over again with that processing plant. But there is no question huge amounts of radioactive water are being dumped. They can't find the corium. It is absolutely unmitigated a disaster. And thank you very much for the information, and we'll follow up on the saltwater issue. Let's get on back to current events here. Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, is out there saying, yes, there is a deep state. There is this shadowy network of powerful, entrenched federal and military interests that are working to destabilize the administration of President Donald Trump in order to perpetuate their own position, wealth, power, and so forth. It is a corrupted system. And possibly by way of illustration, there's been a new development in the IRS scandal. Remember that IRS scandal where the IRS was out there delaying, interfering, asking for unreasonable paperwork, basically targeting the Tea Party group, conservative groups in general, conservative activists in general. And so the IRS, which, by the way, is a private corporation that works for the Federal Reserve, which is also a private corporation, they were in trouble for violating a court order barring the IRS from destroying evidence related to this targeting of conservative groups. Now, Microsoft actually filed a Freedom of Information Act calling on the IRS to produce data showing what it was up to, data that was stored on the hard drive of the former director of transfer pricing operations at the IRS Large Business and International Division, Samuel Maruca. There was a legal order from the Department of Justice to freeze all documents and data. But the IRS has just informed the Department of Justice that the hard drive in question was wiped clean back in April of last year, almost a year ago, even though the legal hold had already been put in place. So they're already out there destroying data to cover up what's been going on out here. Now, Tucker Carlson came on out and said all this nonsense about Russia interfering with the election. NBC was tinkering with the election far more than Russia when they released that Access Hollywood Trump tape to the Washington Compost. That was going to have far more impact on the results of the election than anything coming from Russia. Of course, the corporate media probably feels they have some kind of a right to tinker in the election on behalf of their own personal opinion, which I disagree with. You want to expose government wrongdoing, but you don't want to go on out there and sell the president, even though that is what the corporate media has been doing for many, many decades. In fact, there was even a series of books out there, The Selling of the President. So, corporate media seems to think that tinkering with the election, swaying the election results, misreporting the election results in the poll is their exclusive province. How dare those evil Russians cut into our action here? Now, as it turns out, the meddling shoe is now on the other foot. Congress is demanding an investigation into Barack Obama's giving of U.S. taxpayer dollars to various groups run by George Soros that were basically promoting leftist political revolution in other countries, and obviously in this one as well. That's meddling in the elections of other countries by Barack Obama and by George Soros. Now, Soros is probably going to have a little bit more to think about on his plate. Apparently over in Dallas, the head of a Dallas police organization is starting a class action lawsuit against a collection of Black Lives Matter figureheads and other individuals for inciting racial violence against American police officers. And I think it's probably a good idea. And I hope that they're able to basically make a serious dent in Soros' operations over there. Meanwhile, earlier today, the Senate has confirmed former Senator Dan Coates to serve as the Director of National Intelligence. Boy, oh boy, looking at all the mess that's out there right now, I almost wonder why he would even want the job, because he's going to have to clean up this mess that his predecessors have left for him to deal with. And it's been made worse, of course, by the WikiLeaks dump of the CIA files, Snowden's exposure of the National Security Agency. The American people are openly hostile to the intelligence community as a whole, and he's going to have to deal with that. And simply getting on TV and saying that, oh, the American people trust the intelligence agencies is really not going to do that. And apparently Tucker Carlson took a CIA spokesperson to task, who went on his show and said, the public trusts the U.S. intelligence services. No, we don't. You have betrayed our trust and confidence way too many times, all the way back to Echelon. Remember that Seattle Apex scandal? U.S. government spooks were breaking into the computers of conference attendees, not to find criminals, not to find terrorists, but to steal business secrets to give to Bill Clinton's cronies. That is what the intelligence services are really like. They're not the swell bunch of Joes you see in the Tom Clancy books or the Harrison Ford movies or the James Bond movies. It's all myth-making and make-believe. The intelligence agencies, especially the CIA, are just mafia-esque thugs wrapped in the American flag. And look what they're involved in. Gun running, drug running, overthrowing governments. It's not very pleasant to look at. And no, we don't trust the intelligence agencies. Now here's a little bit of good news. Attorney General Sessions has now withdrawn the previous administration's 6-year legal battle against Texas' new voter ID law. Basically called on down there and said, we're dropping this whole thing, pass your voter ID law, and they're sending a message to the other states. Yes, you can pass whatever voter ID laws you deem to be appropriate for where you are. And I am absolutely delighted that this administration is starting to actually take on the issue of election fraud. There's a lot more to do, and we're going to be really focusing on that as we get into the summer months, because there's a lot more to do, a lot more to deal with. The fraud is just built into the system right now. Now, over at Bloomberg, they wrote this, basically a hit piece, a very dangerous WikiLeak. And they're in there saying that, you know, these WikiLeaks, these are the tools used by the CIA to spy on terrorists and foreign adversaries. And that was bad to let that on out. Now, Bloomberg has shown once again they're firmly a part of the establishment. But let's get one thing straight. Real criminals and real terrorists are able to create their own systems of encryption the NSA cannot crack. We demonstrated that on this website a few years ago. Real criminals and terrorists also know that all electronic communications are compromised, going back to that 1980s Echelon project. They're going to use other means to communicate. For example, the number stations. If you're a shortwave aficionado, you probably tune around the dial. Every once in a while, you'll stumble across the shortwave station, and all they're broadcasting are numbers. Just endless, endless strings of numbers. Those are messages going to spies in other countries who have what are called one-time keypads. They look up the number, and there's a word associated with it, and they put together their message that way. That's an unbreakable code, because it is a one-time code. So all of this CIA and NSA spying is all about a government terrified of its own population spying on law-abiding Americans. And as the Seattle APEC demonstrated, stealing the business secrets for political cronies. Or as Snowden revealed, stealing images of your significant other in states of undress for their, shall we put it politely, personal amusement. At bottom, we have a government openly in violation of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and apparently Bloomberg is perfectly happy with that. We're going to take a break for commercials. I'm going to see if we've got an update on the Dutch elections, and we'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to the show. And the initial exit polling numbers from the Netherlands are not looking very good for Geert Wilders. Apparently Mark Rutte's VVD party is well in the lead. Interestingly enough, I'm already seeing comments all over the place if the globalists have rigged this election the way they did the Scottish independence referendum and the way they tried to rig the Brexit vote. So we're in an age right now where the people of planet Earth have actually lost all trust and faith in the democratic process because of all the cheating that has come to light. Now, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Linda in Foxborough, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. This news story that I bumped into today, Trump gives CIA power to drone strike. Did you hear about this?
Yeah, I did, and it does appear that Trump is getting some what we would consider to be bad advice, and he's driving the U.S. deeper into this Middle East quagmire that is ultimately going to be a disaster. But the defense contractors are just happy as all heck because they're getting all kinds of money for this stuff.
But this is, I mean, the Pentagon, when the military did the CIA is according to these articles, CIA always was involved. They directed.
Oh yeah, of course, of course. And the scandal there was that CIA's criteria for picking targets was not based on any actual factual knowledge of somebody doing. They were profiling people. One of the worst incidents that happened is the CIA simply decided that anybody who was exceptionally tall had likely been recruited by the terrorist armies. Therefore, anybody that was exceptionally tall became a target. And there was this one horrible incident where the drone operators saw a crowd walking across the street with a very tall person in the middle, and they ordered a drone strike. And it turned out to be a teacher with a class of young students going on some kind of a field trip.
Well, both the military and the CIA parameters were quite low. They were something like reasonably, possibly, just ridiculous. But the CIA will be able to do these covertly. When they were in the military, hands of the military and the public, Pentagon, they were, as the article says, mostly public. The CIA will be able to do this now covertly in Syria, where they have their assets. This is preposterous. The people,
I agree.
We have to do something about this.
I agree. Well, you're doing something right now. You're voicing your anger where a lot of people can hear it, and that's a very good thing to do. I very much disagree with Donald Trump on his war policy. All the more so because certainly this is one campaign promise he made that he clearly is not going to be keeping. But again, he's probably been told that unless the war agenda moves forward, the U.S. is looking at an economic and political collapse. And as president, he's thinking what's best to keep the government running, and that means promoting the war agenda. Unfortunately, Donald Trump campaigned to the American people, but now he's basically looking at the problems from the point of view of the extreme fragile nature of our current economy and governmental systems. And as a matter of fact, the next story that I've got coming up has more of the same. And I don't agree with this, mostly because I think that escalating the situation in the Middle East is not going to resolve the situation in our favor anyway. All we're doing is we're making enemies faster than we can ever deal with them. We've reached that point where we've made more enemies than we can actually fight off if they were all to unite against us.
Oh, I know. I agree with you there. But I just feel that this will definitely, because Russia is there in Syria, I find this to be extraordinarily dangerous move. And these powers, according to this article, and of course they always say, basically unnamed U.S. officials, so
yes,
it's difficult to know. But they said that these powers may be expanded for them to use them in other countries.
Okay,
and
well, I'm going to have to let you go. I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go back to the phones here, I want to put forward what I think is going on inside the Trump administration. Donald Trump last year campaigned on the American people's growing distrust and resentment of the federal government, of the elite establishment. And now that he's in the White House, Donald Trump has probably been made very aware of just how fragile the nation is, economically and politically. We've seen record low numbers for approval of Congress, record low numbers for trust of the government as a whole, record low numbers of trust of the corporate media. It could all come apart. Now, obviously, I'm not in agreement with this next piece of news either, but apparently, as you know, Judicial Watch is suing the State Department to look for more of Hillary Clinton's emails. And apparently, Donald Trump's State Department, under Sessions, is saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to spend any more time, waste any more resources looking for as yet uncovered Hillary Clinton emails from her time at the department. Now, the only thing that makes sense to me, because Trump has to know that if Hillary does not go down, she's going to be haunting him for the next 4 years. She's already talking about another run in 2020. So's Cuomo, apparently. So the only thing that makes sense right now for Trump and Sessions to tamp this thing down is that Trump has been told that, yes, indeed, Hillary Clinton was selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests while Secretary of State and using her charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments. This is a scandal more than sufficient to bring down the already fragile federal government, and that may be what Trump is thinking. He doesn't want it all to come apart under his watch. He doesn't want to go down in the history books as the last president of the United States. I see this as confirmation that Hillary was selling these secrets. And obviously, I think the scandal should come on out, but Trump may be thinking about just keeping things together and keeping it going. And unfortunately, I think Trump is beginning to realize the country is in such bad shape that all he can do is barely keep it going along, and there's no room, no latitude to try and bring about any positive change. Although, like I said, I approve of what they're doing with the state voter ID laws. So I think that's my opinion, my theory about what's going on, why all of a sudden Trump is pulling back on some of these scandals, despite his promises during the campaign season. I don't think they got to him. I don't think they threatened him. I think Trump is simply thinking in terms of not letting a scandal come out of sufficient magnitude to basically provide that final death blow to a government that's already struggling to maintain legitimacy in the eyes of the public, and failing miserably, I might add. All right, let's grab a few phone calls. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Mike, as far as the wars go, if Donald Trump thinks that he's going to avoid an economic collapse by getting us into a war, let me tell you, let me remind you of the consequences. I'm sure you know, but anyway, you could have anything from a destruction of the planet that comes to like a war between the United States and Russia. It could signal the end of the planet. That's in one extreme. The other, it's more likely we get bogged down in some localized war, either an invasion of Iran or an attempted invasion of Iran, or getting bogged down in Syria and in Iraq again. This would mean, lots of casualties, lots of boys coming back in body bags and or leaving parts of themselves in some other country, or having a draft, I believe, because I don't think we have the amount of troops we need in the military right now.
No, we absolutely do not. The draft legislation is sitting in committee in Congress, ready to go at a moment's notice here. The situation right now is, I know the conventional wisdom is that war is good for the economy. That's not really true. It's always great for the defense contractors and their people. But in this particular context, the need to get the world going back to Bretton Woods and using the U.S. Federal Reserve note for all international trade and banking, that's an objective that cannot be achieved until the war is already over and done with and we have been victorious, which is not guaranteed right now. And in the process of getting into that war, they could shatter what remains of our economy, which means there'd be nothing at the end of the war. There'd be nothing for us to offer the rest of the world in terms of a preferred currency.
But again, the thing is this: if there's a draft, you've now got 18-year-olds can vote today. You've also got the most informed, I don't think the least informed, I think the most informed people are the so-called millennials and Generation Z, who don't get their news from the fake stream media, but get their news from the internet and from people like you, okay, you, Alex Jones, and RT and others. And you would have riots, and you'd have people refusing to go in, and if they did go in Vietnam, one of the things, of course, the Vietnam War to the end was the fragging of offices,
it was a major problem. Anyway, listen, there's something going wrong with our phone connection here. So I'm going to have to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call. Yeah, resistance to a draft would exceed what we saw during Vietnam. Back during Vietnam, the majority of the American people had bought into the lie that we had to... Okay, I can't even begin to understand you. We're going to let you go. Thank you very much here. And we seem to be having some technical issues. But in this case... the situation is the American people don't believe in the moral rightness of any of these wars. They are going to be far more resistant to sending their children off to be killed and crippled than was even the case back in Vietnam. Remember what I said about Sun Tzu and the Art of War. For the U.S. government to win a war, any of these wars, they have to have a military that believes in the moral rightness so that they will fight fiercely and, if necessary, die. And you have to have a civilian population that believes in the moral rightness so that they will bear the burdens war brings to a society, even to the winning side. It costs everybody. Only the bankers and the defense contractors come out of these things rich. So that's the situation that they're in right now. All right, let's see if we can take a call from Fran in Washington State and see if we can get a better quality signal there. Fran, are you there?
Yeah, Michael, aloha nui nui.
Aloha nui nui.
Can you hear me?
Much better phone call quality, yes.
Okay, it's on my smartphone, actually. So, I have been pondering, and you know, in this case, it can be really a capitalized. George Carlin, in one of his bits, said, you know, they don't care about you. They don't care about you. And I'm...
Hello?
The military-industrial complex is in the process of going rogue. And I'm thinking...
Oh, wait a minute. They've always been rogue. We seem to be having some issues. You know, I think what I'm going to do is we're going to have to close the phone lines for the rest of the day. Oh, we're good now? All right. We're good. We have some new equipment in the control room, but apparently it's going through birth pains here, and we're getting all kinds of issues. Anyway, Fran, need to finish up. Got another phone call. Got lots of news before our third-hour guest.
Okay, I'll make it quick, I'll try to make it quick. The alligators in the swamp, the cabal, the whatever, the shadow government, they don't care about us. I think Trump is discovering that the president really has no power whatsoever. And neither do the Congress critters. They've all been bought. So, you know, it's really spiraling out of control, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight, and we sure can't seem to cause it to happen.
Well,
anyway,
we don't. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. There's still all kinds of noise on the line here. The fact is, the military-industrial complex has always been more or less rogue. Even Eisenhower warned us about that. We know the intelligence agencies have been rogue since the moment of their creation. And certainly in the case of Donald Trump, he's surrounded by a political establishment that is trying to isolate him and render him completely impotent. And I may chastise Donald Trump for some of these decisions we're seeing in the wars and so forth, but we have to acknowledge that Donald Trump himself, he's after all only human, there's only so many hours in the day, and he is so absorbed with all of this draining the swamp and dealing with the alligators that he is allowing other people to decide policy, and he's just signing off on it without really realizing how it looks to ordinary people out here. And Donald Trump, I know he uses Twitter to broadcast out there. Maybe he should start reading some of the feedback that's coming back because it's starting to be a little less enthusiastic than it was immediately after the inauguration. All right, we're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the phone lines. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I love what Trump's doing on the border, and I'm heartened by what you reported today about the challenge in Texas being dropped. But he's basically outsourced foreign policy. I mean, like in Vegas, in the casino, the house never loses. These neocons never lose. The military-industrial complex never loses. And I've gotten to the point where I think Trump's numbers would go to 90% if he just called, announced a press conference or a speech from the Oval Office and just spoke frankly and honestly with the American people once and for all and just said, the president is powerless. This is a powerless job. This country, the swamp is just it's just impossible. You can't. You have a media that's attacking him. You have a corrupt judiciary that will overturn all of his executive orders or his new laws. It's just nothing's going to get done. These liberals, they don't need to defeat him in the midterm elections or the presidential election. All they need to do is it's just basically a holding action. Just block him at every turn, and then come 2020 rather, then just steal the election. Mission accomplished.
Well,
that's all. Nothing's ever going to get done. I've gotten so cynical. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it.
Well, no matter how cynical I get, I just can't keep up. And I'll be very honest, I would be very, very surprised if we actually get to the 2020 elections the way things are breaking apart. The American people are just, they've absolutely lost confidence, trust, and faith in our political class, if you will. And I really do foresee the U.S. is headed for the same kind of catastrophic dissolution as the former Soviet Union. And in fact, at this point, I don't see any way it can be avoided, simply because there are too many elements of our system that have gone rogue. There is no real leadership. Donald Trump is being blocked by personal interests in the military-industrial complex, big pharma, and so forth. He's making positive changes in those areas that aren't really that important to the true elites of this country. But he is finding himself as limited by bureaucratic interference as John F. Kennedy did. And I think that's a warning. He's being blocked by all of the current establishment, because they see that any significant change means an end to their access to your wallets, their access to the lives of your children for their wars, and they are absolutely digging in their heels and saying, no, we will not allow any change to the system because the system works for us, and that's the way we set it up. All right, Bob, I'm going to let you go. Thank you. We're going to close the phone lines. We're apparently having some kind of an issue where there's a lot of noise on the line, and we'll just let them, our hard-working technicians at RBN, work at this for another day before we open up the phone lines again. Plus, I'm getting emails from listeners that I'm taking too many phone calls anyway. So we will now accede to their wishes, at least for the remainder of this program. Now then, as you know, Julian Assange came on out yesterday with this claim that the deep state is working on a plan to somehow get Donald Trump out of office and put Mike Pence in. Either find some way to impeach him, which is not going to be possible unless the Democrats recapture both houses of Congress next year. If not that, remove him under the 25th Amendment by finding somebody to say, yeah, frankly, we think he's really crazy. Or they can always use the Kennedy method to get rid of him. But Vice President Pence came on out today just absolutely blasting Assange, saying, that's absurd, it's ridiculous, how can you even think about such a thing? So remember that old adage in Washington, D.C., never believe anything until it's officially denied? Well, it's been officially denied now. And by the way, you want to talk about liberal pettiness? Apparently out in California, some vandals got over the fence onto one of Donald Trump's golf courses and basically carved it up with sayings like "no more tiger, no more woods," and the corporate media are trying to claim they were environmental activists concerned about the environmental damage that a golf course will cause. Well, golf courses are actually a haven for nature, a lot of plants producing oxygen. We actually have a very rare Hawaiian owl that's taken up residence in the golf course out here. I see it flying back and forth all the time. But here's something else I see, because I get up very early in the morning to do this, and I look down at the golf course, and long before sunrise I'll see those workers out there, because it takes a lot of work and care to keep those golf courses looking the way they do. And obviously these liberal activists, representatives of the party of the people, have no respect for the work that these groundskeepers do to keep the golf courses looking good. And obviously filling in those letters and producing a nice fairway again is going to take up a lot of their time. And it is petty. All they've done is continue to damage the liberal Democratic brand in the eyes of the American people. And that's why so much of the Democratic leadership is now starting to turn against Hillary and Obama and the liberal whiners, because they're concerned that the American people are judging the entire Democratic Party by what's been going on last year and this year. And they should. They should. The Democratic leadership did allow it to happen. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, interestingly enough, and again, it looks like Geert Wilders is in second place in the Dutch elections, and sadly, it's a distant second. And again, looking at comments on Twitter and over there in the European press, they're already speculating that the globalists came in and rigged this election the way they did the Scottish independence referendum and tried to rig but failed the Brexit vote. So Marine Le Pen ought to take note of what's going on here, because right now she's booming in the polls. Her only real opponent is just in crash mode, crater mode, because of officially now being under investigation for having given his wife a very high-paying government job that did not actually involve any kind of work or even showing up. Meanwhile, Credit Suisse issued a guide to investors saying that Marine Le Pen right now is the biggest risk to European stability. And it's another reminder that the bankers are all supporting globalism because they dream of enslaving the entire human race to a single private central bank and consolidate their plans of the last 300 years. Now, the Dutch premier, who looks like his party's going to win this election, is out there slamming Brexit, slamming Trump, and desperately wants to turn the tide of populism in the election. And it's amazing when you hear all these people who use the word populism like it's an obscenity. You know, we've got this trend toward populism. Ooh, populism. Bleh. Populism is a four-letter word. And, of course, anybody criticizing or objecting to populism is essentially telling the people to go jump in a lake, because global dictatorship is here to stay, and you might as well just get used to it. I don't think so here. Erdogan is continuing his war of words with Europe. He's calling Merkel a terrorist supporter, and he's now going to take Germany to the European Court of Human Rights over Germany's refusal to allow Turkish officials to enter the country to deliver campaign speeches to Turkish nationals who are now waiting refugee status in Germany. Erdogan's coming up on his referendum, on which hinges much expanded power and authority for himself. And apparently the vote is really, really close, and that's why he's got his knickers in a twist, that he should be allowed to campaign to Turkish nationals in other countries who are still apparently allowed to vote in the Turkish referendum. Over in Libya, clashes continue for a third straight day, artillery exchanges all over the capital. And I love the way they describe this. After forces loyal to the UN-backed government stormed the headquarters of a rival militia. And always remember, when they say UN-backed government, what they mean is imposed puppet rulers. Nowhere in the UN Charter is the UN allowed to choose a government for a country. In fact, in the UN's own Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it says you're allowed to pick your own leadership. So the UN is now illegitimate. They're being used as a rubber stamp for this program of installing puppet regimes around the world. We'll be right back after station identification. Yeah, it really is a bad idea, and it looks like they're going to do it anyway, because, hey, look how well it worked out the last 2 times. All right, welcome back to our show. It's hour number 2, and the phone lines are closed. We've got some new equipment was just put into our control room, but it's having birthing pains, as it were. Either that or the giant mutant hamster we have in that wire wheel to generate electricity has sold out to the deep state, and he's actually tap dancing in there and causing all kinds of problems there. But we will work this all out, and we will get a quality signal back out to you just as soon as we possibly can, and hopefully we'll be able to open the phone lines, if not today, certainly tomorrow. Now then, over in Baghdad, there's been a bombing, left 18 people dead, 22 injured. A lot of this stuff going on all over. Somebody's fanning up the chaos like crazy. Apparently a car exploded at the Polish Foreign Ministry in the capital of Warsaw. At least 2 people were killed there. Now, who wants to generate chaos to bring down sovereign nations and leave the world ready for a single global government? I have no idea. Excellent. Nobody occurs to me at this point. Over in Korea, things are getting very, very tense indeed. North Korea has put their entire military into combat mode. Every military person, even if they're away on business, on leave, off base for training, are ordered back to their units right now. And from North Korea's perspective, what the U.S. claims is only a massive drill looks very much like preparations for an actual invasion. The arrival of the Carl Vinson aircraft carrier is not going to make things look any less tense. The big question is, what sort of false flag will the U.S. use to make it look like North Korea started things? After Saddam's nuclear weapons and Iran may be thinking about nuclear weapons and Assad's sarin gas and all the rest of it, the U.S. can't just go on in and attack North Korea. Everybody is going to see it as naked aggression by the American empire against a country who refuses to do what the American empire tells it to do. They're going to need something to make it look like North Korea started this. Remember, the Cheosan was a South Korean ship that was torpedoed and sank, and they tried to frame North Korea for it. That one fell apart because they had blueprints of the torpedoes that North Korea is using in their submarines. And when they hauled up the remains of the actual torpedo that sank the Cheosan, it turned out it wasn't the same weapon. It was very obviously not the same weapon. So that one fell apart. But it does indicate they're willing to frame North Korea for something. Will they try and sink another ship? Will they fling a missile here in Hawaii that will miss Hawaii but put a very nice huge mushroom cloud out there on the ocean for the tourists to all take pictures of? They've got to do something. They've got to do something. So anyway, the Carl Vinson is there in South Korea. It's carrying a full complement of fighter jets. And that's got to be making North Korea very tense, and that, of course, is why they're ordering their military into combat mode. They cannot trust the U.S. government when the U.S. government says this is only a drill. This thing is massive. Hundreds of thousands of people. Ships, planes, missiles, armed drones. And the North Koreans know what war with the United States is like, because back during the Korean War in the 1950s, U.S. bombs killed close to 30% of the population of North Korea. 30%. They haven't forgotten. They have not forgotten at all. Now, China, even though it is continuing to have little diplomatic signals that it doesn't want to get involved in any hostilities between North Korea and the United States, they're still concerned over that terminal high-altitude area defense missiles system. And apparently they've worked up a system where they can jam the controlling radars. THAAD is very much like the standard missiles on the Aegis ships. You paint the target with a tagged radar beam. The seeker in the missile homes in on that beam, hits the target. Apparently China's developed a system that can jam that radar system and send the missile off someplace completely different. Now, this is a bizarre story. Everybody wants to know why the Pentagon goes through so much money. They have a real attitude problem. This was actually reported in the BBC, and apparently General David Perkins was at a military symposium, and he bragged about the capabilities of the Patriot missile, which was kind of oversold during the first war in Iraq. They claimed 90% interception. Actually, it turned out to be less than half. But they've been working to improve it. And apparently an unnamed U.S. ally used a Patriot missile to shoot down a quadcopter drone. Huzzah, huzzah, the system works. One small problem, that Patriot missile goes for $3 million a pop. The quadcopter they shot down cost $200 from Amazon.com. So, I personally don't consider that a successful weapon. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. Been a new scandal. We thought we had left behind the tailhook parties and so forth and so on, but apparently not. 9 military officials who called themselves the Wolf Pack held a raging $50,000 party with prostitutes. Apparently they were using General Douglas MacArthur memorabilia in sex acts, drank the hotel absolutely dry of Dom Perignon while eating foie gras and cigars. Now, the good news for you taxpayers is you didn't pay for this. But it was a bribe, apparently, from a gentleman known as Fat Leonard, who has swindled tens of millions of dollars from the U.S. military. And these officers included a Rear Admiral, Bruce Lovelace, Captain Donald Hornbeck, Captain David Lausman, Marine Colonel Enrico de Guzman, Warrant Officer Robert Gorsuch, Captain James Dolan, and Commander Stephen Shedd. They call themselves the Wolf Pack. Sometimes they call themselves the Lions King Harem, the Cool Kids, and the Brotherhood. And apparently they were actively scouting for other naval or military officers who could be brought into this little scam of accepting sex, trips, and other perks from Fat Leonard in order to provide information that could be used to fraudulently secure military contracts. And that's why the Pentagon is using up so much money. Like I said, I disagree with Donald Trump's increasing of the Pentagon budget by $54 billion. I think he ought to say, go back and find that $6 trillion you lost. Spend that instead. Now, Donald Trump's raising of the Pentagon budget and his policy so far with regard to the military, as demonstrated by his tour of the Gerald R. Ford and his talking it up as a huge accomplishment, which we know it was not. And so there's this article that came over reader-supported news, basically saying that Donald Trump is a child of those post-war years, and like most of us of that vintage, we have vivid memories of this Emmy Award-winning NBC documentary series called Victory at Sea, and every once in a while it's still being replayed on the various history and educational channels. And it was definitely done to glorify the accomplishments of the U.S. Navy during World War II. And the problem we have right now is, for the most part, our current naval development consists of building the same ships that won that last war, rather than deal with the new paradigm. And we went through the exact same thing in the run-up to World War II. Carriers were viewed as, well, nice to have, possibly useful. But the conventional wisdom among the Navy was that the giant battle wagon controlled the seas, and that's all that you really needed. And then, of course, the opening months of World War II revealed just how vulnerable battleships were to the newer weapons, the aircraft carriers. And so all of a sudden they're building aircraft carriers. And the battleships are now all in museums. Well, the same thing is going on here. The emphasis is on these carriers, even though most military analysts are saying they are highly vulnerable to the latest generation of anti-ship cruise missiles, like the Silkworm. And I'm sure there are others that are out there that are simply too fast, too maneuverable for the current onboard defensive systems of these ships to deal with. The Phalanx Gatling gun, sometimes it's called Q's, the close-in weapon system, is, like the ballistic missile defense system itself, built on a doctrine of a possible threat coming in on a straight, predictable course. And the new generation of anti-ship missiles coming out of Russia and China move around, whip back and forth randomly. Same thing with their MIRV warheads. They don't follow a predictable ballistic track anymore. They move around. And the U.S. isn't really dealing with that. Everyone's putting a lot of hopes on zero time-of-flight weaponry, but that's proving to be very, very difficult. There's a finite limit past which optical lasers will not work because of thermal blooming. And while they may call it zero time of flight, that's not the reality. Even at the distances of an anti-ballistic missile system, there is going to be a noticeable delay. It's measured in fractions of a second, but that's all it takes to make targeting your incoming threat difficult. So, anyway, a lot of people are very critical of this buildup of the military that won the last war instead of really focusing on what it's going to take to just survive and get through this next one here. And by the way, a little reminder here, everybody likes to say the United States has never lost a war. Well, we certainly lost in Vietnam. We're not exactly winning in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen. We're stuck in a quagmire there. And the other part of the image you need to remember is the United States did not win World War I and World War II all by its lonesome. They were on the winning side. In the case of World War II, they didn't even get into the war until they knew which side was going to win, and they hopped on. So, now then, lately CNN has drawn a lot of criticism for all the technical issues that seem to happen when somebody is on the air that is not following the deep state script. And the latest one happened where CNN had a live feed from the White House with Donald Trump explaining why Obamacare wasn't working. And Trump then had a guest come on explaining how her family saw their insurance premiums go up by 3 times, at which point the CNN feed from the White House went blank. Donald Trump needs his own TV network. And like the corporate media, it has to be available, mandatory, on all cable system providers. Call it the White House channel. I think it's high time. I think it is high time. And by the way, Donald, I'd be happy to help you set that up. Now, Ellen Brown has come out with a very, very good article. Ryan Care is dead on arrival. Can we please try single payer? And basically, Ellen has done a very good analysis, pointing out that the reason Obamacare has failed, the reason why whatever it is that's going to be voted on in Congress next week is not going to work, is because they're not dealing with the real core of the health care problem in this country, which is the sky-high cost of medical care in this country against the poor quality of that care and the focus on constant treatment of symptoms in perpetuity as opposed to the emphasis on a single cure that returns people back to the workforce. All driven by profit. Now, Ellen Brown points out that Ross Perot, who ran for president in 1992, had the right idea. He got up there and said, all we have to do is look at other countries that have better health care at lower cost, and we just do what they're doing. It makes an amazing amount of sense. And it makes it look like Ryan Care is basically like Obamacare. It's being crafted to drive wealth from your pockets into favored economic centers, medical care, insurance companies. Only this time it's our medical care centers and insurance companies rather than the Democrats. The Federal Reserve has raised the prime rate 1/4 of a point, 0.25. A lot of people figured that's what it was going to be. It was enough to say we raised the rate, but not so much to trigger a panic on the stock market. So they're dancing a very, very fine line on that one. But it is going to impact anybody who's got a variable rate mortgage, variable rate car loan, variable rates on your credit cards. You should all be working as hard as you can to be getting out of debt right now before it really starts to come apart. Learn to do without. Just get those credit card payments paid off. Hang on to your old car, hang on to your old clothes, your old appliances. Stop buying stuff on credit cards. And it looks like that word may be getting on out because there's a very alarming article over at Zero Hedge that reports U.S. department store sales just plunged. And they're doing the tracking on the basis of credit card purchases at these department stores. And the numbers just fell off a cliff. People don't want to borrow more money. People want to get out of debt slavery. They're either paying cash for what they're buying at the retailers, or more than likely, given how many retailers are in serious trouble, they're simply starting to understand, I don't need a new coffee maker this year. I don't need this year's fashion color clothes. I don't need the latest and greatest whiz-bang smartphone. I'm just going to go on using what I've already got and already paid for. Which is very wise and very prudent. All right, we're going to go ahead and do a test of our phone system and see if it's back to working. Brian in Phoenix, aloha. Welcome to the show. Well, no, we're still getting noise and crackling. Brian, yeah, it's crackling really, really badly.
I can take care of that.
All right, so Brian, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. What's on your mind?
I'm pretty excited because in Arizona we just passed in our state Congress the Convention of States. We approved it in our state. Have you heard of it?
No, I hadn't. I'd heard rumblings that they were looking at it. I didn't get the report that it actually passed.
Yeah. Now that makes the seventh state in our union that has approved this Convention of States action, and leaving only 27 more that need to be approved before a convention can be held, in which case they can draft any amendments they see fit to limit our runaway Congress and their spending and the like.
Well, I would love to see that. I would love to see that. The uphill battle, of course, is that most of the people who are governors and legislators at the state level view their office as a training ground, stepping stone to the big party in Washington, D.C., so they tend to be less than sympathetic to anything that might curtail their authority and power should they make that leap to Washington, D.C. We saw the same thing back in the 1990s. There was a movement for what was called the Ultimatum Resolution, and the resolution was very simple. It was a state measure that said when the national debt goes over $6 trillion, the federal government is dissolved. And they worked very hard. They did get it passed in a couple of states, but they fell far short of the necessary states to actually have this go into effect. And again, that's because the politicians at the state level are just as corrupted as the politicians at the federal level.
Well, it's miraculous that they're as successful as they have been thus far. With
I agree, and I wish them good luck. We're going to have to let you go. Take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I'm looking at this article coming out of Sputnik News where they're asking, will Pyongyang respond to the USS Carl Vinson visit to South Korea? And in there is a quote. The Carl Vinson aircraft carrier made a port call in South Korea on Wednesday amid warnings from military leaders that their upcoming joint war games may be disrupted by a strike from North Korea. They just telegraphed the false flag. They're going to have somebody out there near the exercise flip off a torpedo or a missile, and they're going to say, oh, it was North Korea did it. The war is on. We're already over here. Might as well start the invasion. What they're going to do. All right, we're going to try another phone call and see if our technical gremlins are being brought under control. Jeff in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Thank you for taking my phone call. Yes, I wanted to get your, I guess, thought of, you know, the Marines that are, I think they said we have close to, like, going towards the north of 10,000 over there in Iraq and Syria combined. I guess U.S. troops and all?
Yes. But apparently another 2,000 are on their way over there right now.
Yeah, because they're all supposed to be, because it's for the imminent attack against Raqqa, right?
Well, supposedly, yes.
Well, could you see that, since we all know ISIS is kind of controlled, you know, what was the possibility of them already, like, having a nuclear type of weapon? Or what is the smartest conventional nuclear weapon that can be made? And could it be in that city? And could they just be waiting for, like, us to invade and then set it off? Because, I mean, how far into the city would troops need to be affected by that blast?
Well, that would depend, obviously, on how powerful the weapon was, and it would obviously be advantageous for it to be above the city rather than buried within it. But you need to remember, they never found any nuclear weapons in Iraq. It was a bluff. It was a lie to get the American people to go along saying, yes, we must invade Iraq, or Saddam is going to nuke us in our sleeps. It was a complete bluff. It was an absolute complete lie. There are very powerful non-nuclear explosives, and like fuel air bombs are extraordinarily powerful. And they're not nuclear, but they're very destructive. I don't think Raqqa is going to self-immolate as a form of defense. I think they'll try and keep the fight out there in the suburbs. Anyway, Jeff, going to let you go.
But what I'm saying, because of the all this talk about nuclear war, and then.
Well, the side that uses nuclear weapons first is going to be seen as in the wrong by the world here, which doesn't.
That's what I mean.
Okay, Jeff, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. I'm going to close the lines here. Now then, the side that uses a nuclear weapon first is going to be seen as in the wrong. That does not preclude somebody using a nuclear weapon that has no backstory, no tracing, no record keeping, setting it off and blaming a third party. And that could very well happen as well. Like I said, this article out of Sputnik News, they're telegraphing the false flag they're going to use to justify an invasion of North Korea. They're going to fire on their own ships and say, oh, look what North Korea has done. All right. Now then, getting on back to the economic news here. Student loan defaults skyrocket by 17%. 4.2 million borrowers are living on the edge of financial disaster for pursuing a college degree. I think somebody ought to be suing those colleges, because those colleges got those kids to sign up and sign up for those student loans with promises of high-paying jobs following graduation that would make paying those student loans off easy, and it didn't happen. The jobs aren't there. We have 17 million people in this country with college degrees doing jobs like parking attendants, store clerks, short order cooks. And some of these people have advanced degrees, masters and doctorates. College is no longer about higher education. It's political indoctrination, and along the way, jamming young people onto that debt slave hook as hard and as fast as they can, as early in life as they can. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm looking at the Fox News feed here, and the banner headline at the bottom, "Are Democrats becoming extremists?" Gee, you think? Maybe. Now, as you know, President Trump is holding a rally in Nashville at 7 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. And obviously, we have to be very, very concerned at all these people who are openly wanting him to be assassinated, including apparently Snoop Dogg, who couldn't figure out any other way to keep himself relevant than to come out with a video. These are very, very dangerous, uncertain times. Okay, now then, back to the economic news. There are allegations that some traders inside London, investors, are receiving advanced knowledge of sensitive government economic reports before they are released to the public and are using them to their advantage. This was a report prepared for the Wall Street Journal by Alexander Kurov, an associate professor of finance at West Virginia University, suggesting London city investors are using confidential information in breach of regulations. Nothing new there. It was actually one of the storylines on the film Trading Places, which was Eddie Murphy and I'm blanking on the rest of the cast. But it was produced by Aaron Russo, who after that went on to produce America from Freedom to Fascism. Up in Canada, big scandal there. Employees at Canada's 5 big banks are speaking out about how they're being pressured by their managers to cheat their customers. And apparently there is a whistleblower website up there called Go Public, and these employees at these 5 big banks are saying they're pressured to upsell, trick, even lie to customers to meet unrealistic sales targets in order to keep their jobs. And apparently there have been so many of these whistleblowing stories, it's fueling calls for a parliamentary inquiry. The banks, of course, insist they're working in their customers' best interests. So Canada's got their share of the money junkies. Now then, apparently natural gas prices could plunge below $2. And apparently natural gas is performing the worst among major commodities. They're blaming it on human-caused global warming because obviously if we've had the warmest winter on record, demand for natural gas goes down. Actually, I think what is going on is that more and more people are choosing all-electric homes because of the dangers of gas leaks. But whatever goes wrong, we're either going to blame Vladimir Putin or human-caused global warming. That's it here. Now, Trump apparently is starting to push back on Obama's fuel efficiency rules. The rules were so strict, it basically mandated everyone drive a Prius. And of course, it was those unrealistic fuel efficiency goals that led some automakers to cheat the fuel efficiency tests. They rigged the software, so when the cars detected that they were undergoing a fuel efficiency test, the engine ran one way, and then when the car realized it was being driven by its owner out on the street, it went back the other way to bring back the performance that the user wanted. So they're starting to push back on that. That's a plus in Trump's column on that one here. Now, over in Greece, probably people have forgotten about all that's going on over in Greece. Those people have been crushed under this manufactured debt from the European Central Bank, the IMF, the World Bank. Half that debt was created through fraud by a previous government, Papandreou and Goldman Sachs. But in the eyes of the bankers, all debt is sacrosanct and holy, and you will pay it even if it is created through fraud. Actually, no. There's a principle in international law called the odious debt, that certain debts incurred by a government are not the responsibility of the people to repay. War debts being one of them. Borrowing money to give to other countries is another. Borrowing money to install systems to spy on the people is another. And believe it or not, we are getting word that lawyers at all these big private central banks are working on ways to try and overturn the principle of odious debt if it ever comes to international court. Because it is a principle, it's been around for a very long time, it has actually been used. When a government has collapsed, the new government will go into the court and say, all of this debt we're being told that we owe is actually odious debt. It was incurred by the previous government for nefarious purposes. Why are we liable for it? We should all keep that in mind as we edge closer to a collapse in this country here. But back in Greece, there have been horrendous riots. In fact, there are so many riots going on in Greece, it's no longer even considered newsworthy. What's going on in Greece? Well, they're rioting again. They were rioting yesterday. They were rioting last week. They'll be rioting tomorrow. That's nothing newsworthy. But apparently, it's reached the point where Greek farmers are fighting the riot police with shepherd crooks. You know, that very tall pole with a little hook at the top. You see them in every Christmas nativity scene. It's used to fish the lambs out from in between rocks when they get stuck. That's what they're down to. Everything else has been looted by the bankers and the government. And still, the bankers have to have more. The money junkies need their fix. Now, as you know, over in Great Britain, the Brexit has passed its last hurdle. It was voted through by the House of Lords. The Queen is going to sign it. And Theresa May had announced they were going to begin the Brexit the end of this month. Well, now the European Union says that they are trying to find a way to delay this until June. Delay, 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 delay. And EU officials are saying they can't get all of the other nations that would be involved in the Brexit negotiations to show up until June. They're basically stalling for time. Now, the good news is Brussels has backed down over that divorce payment from Great Britain, the £52 billion divorce payment. Well, the message was pretty clear. Britain was saying, no, you're basically holding us to ransom. We refuse. End of story. And Brussels said, all right, it was worth a shot. Over in Germany, migrant crime and violence is soaring. Authorities in 2 German states are saying the official figures are showing violent attacks by migrants have almost doubled this year over last year. And Merkel is coming under intense political fire for failing to deport 500,000 migrants, some of whom have been in Germany for 20 years, seeking asylum. And the vast majority of them do not meet the legal definition of a political refugee. Now, here in the United States, there is a PAC that is called Americans for Legal Immigration, and they're basically issuing an ultimatum to Donald Trump. And it's over his campaign promise to end the amnesty, the DACA amnesty for illegals, and that was one of his promises. Frankly, I imagine as full as Donald Trump's plate happens to be right now, it may not be a high priority. But basically, this Americans for Legal Immigration is saying that if Trump does not end the amnesty for illegals by tax day of this year, they will lose ALAPAC support and endorsement, Tea Party movement, and it will be the beginning of the loss of a huge part of his support rooted on the immigration issue as he heads into 2020. I think they could have waited a little longer. Again, Trump has got a lot on his plate right now. I know we all want to see the amnesty program ended. We want to see our nation cleaned up. But you do have to prioritize. Put things in order. This first, then this, then this. Now, we know that the overwhelming majority of terror attacks in this country are false flags. And very often, they are sting operations, entrapment operations, where the FBI will find some poor schmo who's unhappy with life in this country, and they'll send in undercover informants to talk him up. They'll give him the explosives, they'll give him this, and then they'll swoop and make the arrest and say, we've got a terror arrest. And a lot of people were wondering, well, are they just trying to keep the fear level among the American people up to keep us easier to control? And that certainly may be part of the agenda. But according to the Daily Sheeple, the FBI is relying on all their FBI-created terrorism to justify their budget. It's a numbers game. You know, you can't cut our budget. We're catching terrorists. Well, we'll have one next week as soon as we can set them up. Now, in our PC environment, there was a case a while back that really showed the absurdity of political correctness and militant feminism, where the court ordered a man to pay a woman child support for a child that was not his. And everybody said it was a horrible, horrible abuse. It was simply unfair. I remember back in the 1990s, there was this bizarre case where there was this lesbian couple who wanted to have a child, and one of them went on out, met a guy, seduced him, went back to her home, used a turkey baster to move the genetic material over to the woman who wanted to have the child. She got pregnant, then she got into economic trouble, sued the man for child support, and the court gave it to her. So this guy who never even met the woman who had the child was ordered to pay child support. Well, common sense is finally beginning to break loose. Story out of Oraz.com. There's been another case where there was this couple who were married for 3 years. They had a son, and they got a divorce, and she wanted child support. But DNA tests showed he was not the father. She'd been fooling around on him. And the judge said, yeah, the child isn't his, he doesn't have to pay. But it is ridiculous. Now then, Mississippi has become the latest state to start tightening its civil forfeiture laws. Governor Phil Bryant has signed a bill that will require an actual warrant before police can seize your property. And that is a good trend. Way, way back in the 1990s, when this civil forfeiture thing started, and everybody said, well, we're going to go after the proceeds of crime in order to cripple the criminals. And even back then, critics were saying, this is incentivizing police seizures. It's going to go out of control. I remember when I was still living in Southern California, there was this horrible, tragic story where the police were literally looking at properties in terms of the cash value if they could be seized. And there was this property out in Malibu on the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean, a very expensive property, and the police literally said, we're going to raid it, find marijuana plants, we can confiscate the property, sell it, we'll all have lots of money for the police party fund or whatever it is. So that was the basis. They staged a raid in the course of which the homeowner, who didn't realize the guys in the black suits were police officers, tried to defend his home. He was shot and killed. And the police did not, in fact, find any marijuana plants anywhere on that property. It has been completely out of control. And I'm glad some of the states are finally starting to say, we have to have actual evidence of a crime before you can take people's money. I remember one time, a local friend here on Oahu used to own, and I emphasize used to own, a gardening supply company. And he was on his way to a trade show with a lot of cash, because gardening and flowers and plants and seeds and everything tends to be a cash and carry business. And he got stopped at the airport and the money was taken on the suspicion that he was a drug dealer. And he couldn't get his money back, couldn't buy new inventory, went out of business. And no, he was not growing marijuana in the back part of the greenhouse. So I'm glad they're finally pushing back on it, because it's time to get the police to stop thinking about how much money can I take from the law-abiding citizens and start thinking about, well, we need to justify our budget. I'd better go out and find some real criminals. Out in California, this is getting weird. A California elementary school has now banned tag because it's too rough. You know, tag. You run around, tag your it, tag your it, tag your it. Students at this school, Goldridge Elementary in Folsom, California, is saying any kids playing tag on the playground will be punished. California's gone totally nuts. Yesterday after the radio show, Claire and I were spending some time with a friend of ours who just got back from California and said, yeah, they've gone totally nuts there. Used to be from California like us. Would never move back, neither would we. Apparently there was another incident where there was this high school girls basketball team who won a game, and one of the team members has sort of a tradition following a winning game of hugging her brother. That's it. She got stopped by a school administrator. No, 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 you can't hug your brother following a game. What's wrong with you? But of course, any random guy who says he's a woman inside is allowed to use the girls' shower room. You can see how ridiculous liberalism and PC has gotten. And that may be the reason we're seeing this lower third on Fox News. Have the Democrats become extremists? Yeah, they have. And unfortunately, as they continue to lose influence, the only way they can keep attracting attention to themselves is becoming more and more extreme. It almost reminds me of this old Bob Newhart routine where he's a talk show radio host, only nobody's calling on in. And so during the course of the show, he just gets more and more bizarre, like dead burnt babies, I'm for them. Finally, he gets a phone call, and it's his wife asking him to stop at the store on the way home from the station and pick up a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk and everything. Which, fortunately, we don't have to do here at RBN. But you get the idea. The liberals, PC people, they're just trying to find something, anything that they can keep pushing forward on, and they really have made caricatures out of themselves. Okay, been another major hack. This one from Dun & Bradstreet, which licenses information on businesses and corporations. And apparently they got into, and 33 million records of corporate and government employees have been leaked online, including records from the Department of Defense, the U.S. Postal Service, Walmart, Ohio State University. 52 gigabytes in all. More about computers and computer security when we come back from these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I know we hear about Russia hacking in the news, but we're finding out more and more that things are just being left open, that people are being very reckless and careless. We were talking yesterday about this internet accessible backup drive that didn't even have a password on it. And now there's this interesting little tidbit coming out of Giza Death Star about how apparently the CIA had a bunch of classified documents stashed in one of the Rockefellers' barns that they completely forgot what that was there. Somebody could have just picked that stuff up and learned a bunch of secrets. For all this spying on us, they're not being very careful. Now, we've been talking about the problem, the growing awareness that millions of Android phones are literally being sold to customers with malware already on them. And of course, the companies making the phones are saying, no, it's not us. It's happening somewhere in the supply chain. A lot of malvertising, browser hijackers are literally pre-installed into your cell phone at the point of purchase. Some of the phones involved are the Galaxy Note 2, the LG G4, the Galaxy S7, Galaxy S4, Galaxy Note 4, Galaxy Note 5, I think that's what Claire has, the Galaxy Note 8, the Xiaomi Mi 4i, the Galaxy A5, ZTE X500, Galaxy Note 3, Galaxy Note Edge, Galaxy Tab S2, Galaxy Tab 2, the Oppo N3, Vivo X6 Plus, Asus Zenfone 2, the Lenovo S90, Oppo R7 Plus, Xiaomi Redmi, and Lenovo A850. And probably the list is not complete. And it's just insane. So, how do you know if your phone is infected with spyware, either by the government or a marketing company? Well, if it seems to always be running down the battery, that's one giveaway, clue right there. If you're on metered data usage, you should be paying very close attention to that bill that you get every month. Because if you're metered on your usage and you see the usage going up unexpectedly, then you have spyware, malware on the phone. Certainly a major giveaway is unwanted advertising and apps that show up all by themselves. That's something that you need to be keeping an eye out for. Obviously, if the phone is performing poorly, if it's running very slow, that means something's going on in the background that is taking up compute cycles. if you get strange text messages, one of the ways that malware on smartphones is activated is an SMS message that is sent on in, and the malware is supposed to intercept it, not let you see it. But because some of this code is rather poorly written, sometimes the text message will get through, and it's just a series of numbers and characters, and it doesn't make any sense at all. But if you're getting that, it means that somebody out there thinks that you've got malware on your phone that they're trying to communicate with. If you go to websites and they seem to change their appearance, you may have a browser hijacker that's sending you to a bogus location. Meanwhile, you remember that iPhone hacking tool the FBI got back in San Bernardino? They still will not release it. They are still using it. We're going to take a break for station ID, identification. We'll be back with Joe Moulton of Guns 80 after this break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And we are still trying to make connection with Joe Moulton of Guns 80. And as soon as we get him on, we'll go to that segment of our program. Getting on back to computers and stuff, there is... here's a good reason to avoid that Internet of Things. You know, computers are great where they are really useful, but sometimes they try and put computers and things, you just really wonder what they were thinking. So there is this adult toy making company, and they sell a device called the WeVibe 4 Plus. This is a vibrator that is Bluetooth connected and is controlled through an app on your smartphone. And basically, this gets into something that's technically called teledildonics. The hypothetical case is you are on a business trip on the other side of the country. It's at night. You call up your significant other, and you're watching each other through your FaceTime or whatever. You've got the app running, and one party is using this implement, and the other one is controlling it from their end. Fun, 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 fun. Unfortunately, the company got sued because the app was poor security, and they were keeping records about who was doing what to who. All right, it looks like we've got Joe Moulton now. He's the CEO of Guns 80. And Joe, thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, obviously, the reason I wanted to get you on the show today is in a follow-up to that story that was breaking where apparently NBC kind of did an ambush story on basically the 80% guns in general, but they happened to pick on your company in specific. Came on in, ordered a gun, had you ship it to another address, and then ran this banner story that anybody can buy one of these gun kits and send it to a third party who could be a criminal who can build the gun in just a few hours. And they left out some important facts on this story. The guy that the gun was sent to was a retired ATF official who has the tools and the training to be able to fabricate a gun out of one of these kits. And NBC was trying to imply that basically you just get the kit and you put it together with a screwdriver and you've got a working firearm, and of course that is absolutely not the truth. Somebody sent me some parts for an AR almost a year ago. I still don't have that lower receiver machined out. Not that I have a lot of time to spend on my hobbies or anything. But it was a very unfair portrayal of the process of manufacturing one of these 80% guns, along with the idea that street criminals do not use large visible weapons like AR-15s. They prefer small, concealable, disposable, cheap handguns. And criminals aren't going to spend the time to make their own gun. They just steal them from gun stores or police cars, or they get them from Fast and Furious. So what is your feeling about what NBC did, and just take it from here?
Well, you know, the whole pretext of it is really what got me off about it, because they called in, and the lady called in and said that, you know, that she wanted it shipped right away, and that the price wasn't an object, and that they were looking for expedited shipping to this address. And, you know, we've had customers calling with this same request before, and, you know, what they were looking at where they were worried about someone impeding on their rights and taking their rights away before a certain deadline. So we try to help our customers out the best way we can. And then, you know, come to find out, we're reading through the news, and to find a story about it just really, really shocked me. And then, you know, they didn't ask us for our side of the story or what we feel about it. But then they also printed, you know, everything that they put on there had nothing to do with actual factual evidence. If you look up the facts on ghost guns and, you know, 80% receivers, there may be one crime a year on it. And they talk about it, you know, really putting fear in people's minds. And it just feels like they're just trying to trump something up that's not there. And as you said, it's a lot easier for them to go out and steal guns and take guns from law-abiding citizens. This is something that takes time. It takes effort. You have to have skill to do. You know, anyone can do it, but you have to take time and you have to have the preparation to do it. And then also they say that criminals can get it. Well, criminals legally can't own guns. Criminals can't legally make their own guns. So, I mean, by saying that criminals can do this, they're breaking the law, because they can't actually own an 80% receiver and make a gun out of it because they don't have their firearms rights. So it's completely lost the whole story, and then they just really trumped everything up that it was not anywhere close to factual for any portrayal that they had there.
Well, the gun grabbers are pushing, again, for a law in Congress that would ban people from making their own firearms. I presume that would also impact the black powder people as well. But again, you did nothing that violated the law in any way. Everything that you did was absolutely legal. NBC was just being very dishonest. They're trying to rouse up this hue and cry that criminals are able to buy these mail-order gun kits and commit mayhem to try and build public support for this push to further restrict firearms rights in this country. And I do want to go back to what you were saying about that. This is not as easy as NBC tried to make it sound. I mean, they had a gun expert, former ATF, with a machine shop in his home and the experience and training to do this. Now, when I was younger, I did build black powder guns, and I made some really nice weapons. I got to tell you, when I got these parts for this AR, that was a gift from one of our supporters, and I looked at it and I said, this thing scares the heck out of me. This is so far beyond what I already know how to do, and the fact that I haven't actually completed the gun in all this time, I think, is an indicator this is not really something that a casual criminal is even going to want to be involved with. It is a complete misrepresentation of something which rightly ought to be considered as a specialty hobby for gun enthusiasts, to build your own gun. And it was very dishonest of NBC, but then, of course, that's what the corporate media is all about these days. I want to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking with Joe Moulton. He's the CEO of Guns80.com, which is a website where you can order components to build your own AR-15 type rifle. But always remember, it takes a great deal of machining and machining skill to actually turn these parts into a gun. It's not just something you open up the box, you slide tab A into slot B, and you've got a working weapon. It just doesn't work that way. So, Joe, has NBC gotten back to you and said, we're sorry for misrepresenting, or are they just standing their ground and saying, guns are bad, guns are bad, guns are bad?
We actually had the number, the cell phone number of the actual reporter that did it, because as I said, that they requested for it to be expedited, and I texted her and they won't respond back to me. So it seems like they don't actually want to talk or share our side of the story, and, you know, they don't want to talk about the factual representation of the story that they made, because they won't return our calls when we try to reach out to them. And I mean, you know, we would prefer that they go through and actually do a factual portrayal of what it takes to actually make an AR-15 and to understand the laws. I mean, at the end of the day, we want people to understand that, you know what, every citizen has the right, if they legally can, to make their own gun, and if they choose to do so, we'd love to help them do that. But you have to be legally able to do the right. And to say that the criminals can do this, I mean, that's like saying criminals can do anything. There's a law there in place that they legally can't do this, they legally can't own firearms. It's all legally written out. Now, we all know what laws stop criminals and what laws don't stop criminals, but there is a law there in place for it. Everything they said was wrong, number one. And number two, if you look at the statistics of rifles used in, you know, the modern sporting rifle used in actual crimes, it's very, very small. Other reports out there are just very, very small, and that's what 90% of these are, you know, the AR-15, the modern sporting rifle. Most criminal acts are done with handguns, and that's not what this is at all. That's not what they portray at all.
No, it's absolutely true here. And it's rather amazing that so many of these liberal gun grabbers are themselves completely unfamiliar with firearms. because assault rifles firing .223, they can wound you seriously, and yes, they can kill you, but a conventional modern hunting rifle is actually far more deadly because it is designed to kill on that first shot. And nobody's making a big stink about the hunting rifles. It's just the sporting rifle looks scary, and therefore on that basis we're going to go ahead and go after that. But like I said, NBC, and you think they would have learned from like the side-mounted fuel tank hoax. They're out there supporting somebody's political agenda because to me it's very obvious the timing. You know, there's this big push by the gun grabbers to close what they call a loophole in the gun law that says, yes, you're allowed to make your own firearms. And they basically got together with NBC to say, we need stories that make it look like these gun kits can just be sold to anybody and that they can just put them together with a screwdriver in an afternoon and be out there on the streets murdering children by night. And it is a complete misrepresentation of what's going on.
But, you know, legally they have to draw the line somewhere. But, I mean, they have to say, I mean, what are they going to start getting people for buying blocks of aluminum? If you go down and buy a block of aluminum, that could be considered a firearm. I mean, there has to be a place somewhere where they draw a line where this is considered a firearm and this is not considered a firearm. So, I mean, you know, and this is where the ATF has claimed the line is between being a firearm and not being a firearm. And that's what we send out is something that's not a firearm that you do have to finish yourself. But, I mean, if they continue down this path and they make 80% illegal, what's it going to be then? If you go buy aluminum from the store, you may plan on turning that into a firearm, so you're not allowed to do that either? I mean,
well, it doesn't even have to be aluminum. I mean, you can get a block of plastic and make a lower receiver. It's not going to last very long, but it's definitely going to work. We know that there are 3D printing systems that can put out lower receivers and guns. It's completely unenforceable. All of it's a violation of that Second Amendment. Now, obviously, I'm very pro-gun. I'm pro-Second Amendment. I think everybody should be, mandated to go through a gun safety course early in life as part of their school education. So that we demystify the guns, we teach them early on it's not a toy, it's a very serious business, and they can be a lot of fun to punch holes in paper with, which is primarily what I did with my guns.
You know, I agree completely. I mean, we have it where people have to learn how to drive an automobile. They have to have a sex education class. I don't see why a firearm safety class could be that far out of the reach of, you know, just having a society that understands what's going on and at least having some facts to base their information on.
You know, what's really amazing, when I was a kid, schools actually had gun clubs. High schools had gun clubs. They actually were being given war surplus weapons to teach kids how to safely use firearms. And today it's like, oh my goodness, guns are evil, guns are bad. And it's just another reminder that the government is just absolutely terrified of the American people because we're not believing their nonsense anymore. Can you give us a short rundown on exactly what it is that you sell and the process by which it has to go through before it is a firearm?
Sure. What we do is we actually sell a gun kit that actually comes with 100% of the parts that you need to assemble a firearm, and that it's actually 80% complete. So you have to do the last 20% of it to actually finish up the firearm. We send you out a upper receiver, which that's the part of the gun that actually does the firing, the barrel, and stuff like that that's already been pre-tested. So everything that comes to you has already been pre-tested for safety reasons. You have no worries there. What you're going to be working with is the lower receiver in the lower half of the firearm. When you receive that, what you have to do is you have to drill 3 holes on both sides of the receiver for different pins and for the safety selector, and then you have to go through and you have to mill out the actual fire control pocket. That's the thing that keeps the safety, the trigger, all the components of the actual lower parts kit, and that has to be milled out, and you remove the material. With the kit that we provide, it actually gives you a guide and shows you how to do it. And then there's videos on our website that walk you through it step by step. The best way to do it is to get you a drill press. And, you know, this day and age, I think everybody should have a drill press, not only for this, but other things in their home that you need. A drill press is a really handy tool, and then you're looking for an XY vise that works really well.
Yes.
You go through, you remove the material, and then once you remove the material, then there's videos that will walk you through it step by step on how to put your lower parts kit together, how to build your lower half. You connect your lower half to your upper half, and then you have an actual firearm that is that is fully functional.
Well, I can attest to everybody listening to this show, this is not an easy process, especially for somebody who's never tried to do it before, because it has been very, very difficult. And again, the fact that I haven't actually completed this thing, and I am still missing a couple of key parts, but the fact that, you know, it's been almost a year, and I still haven't been able to get this thing together and to get it to work. So this NBC story is a complete, total misrepresentation of what's really going on. And again, if they ban the 80% guns, it's going to have zero impact on crime because criminals are not using these weapons. What it's going to do is shut down another hobby area for firearms. And because people are going to use these, again, the sporting rifles for sporting purposes. They're for target shooting. They're not even really that good for hunting, let alone, you know, going on out and committing crimes. But it is a very complex process, and that's coming from somebody who's already experienced with building black powder firearms. So NBC was totally off base on this, and again, not that anybody still trusts anything that NBC or the corporate media as a whole is saying anymore. Anything else you want to share with us before we let you go?
No, I just really appreciate it, and you know, I'd love to have people stop by, take a look at the videos, and they can actually see how truly complex it is and understand that criminals aren't taking these kits and having the forethought to sit down and build a kit for 3 or 4 hours to go out and do this. Why do that when you could steal one? I mean, it makes no sense. Or you could have someone, you know, the main thing if they needed to crack down on anything would be straw purchases and people buying guns for other people. It's not people making 80% or so for their hobby.
Or they can go on down to Fast and Furious and help themselves to all kinds of weapons down there as well. So, I mean, it really is ridiculous. The gun grabbers are trying to push for a solution that won't really change anything at all other than to further erode our Second Amendment rights. Anyway, so I had the website correct. It's guns80.com, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I hope everybody takes a visit and looks at the instructional videos because NBC did misrepresent it. Take it from somebody who's in the middle of trying to build one of these things. It is not as easy as NBC is trying to make it look. It's very, very hard. It's something that you do only because you want to be able to say, I built my own AR-15. If you just want an AR-15 and you're not a criminal, it's far easier to just go on out and buy one. Okay, so that's where we are on that. Anyway, Joe, thank you very much for spending time with us again, and let's stay in touch over this story and see if we can get NBC to back off a little bit on this latest bit of nonsense.
Fantastic, thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to see if we can take some phone calls here. Carrie in British Columbia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike?
Yes.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm fine. You're on the air.
Good. Yeah. Okay. You know, I know it has nothing to do with the guns right now. I'm in Canada, so you know that's we don't have a Second Amendment here. But anyway, just talking. I just wanted to switch a little bit to the elections in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was really hard trying to get any information through Google today. Their updates were a little biased and that kind of thing. And it looks like the tweets are coming in from the other leaders of the EU. You know, there's the Scottish independence leader. She's said one word on her Twitter account, and it was good, that Geert had lost. And other ones in the EU, not quite sure. It's just a cursory observation, but you know, they're tweeting things like, you know, let's relaunch the EU and let's do these things, and enough of this racist, nationalist type stuff, and all these kinds of things. So, you know, it's amazing how you know, the globalists are really taking over. And I just wanted to see what I don't know if what your thoughts are on what's going on in the Netherlands or not, but I just wanted to hear your take on it and wonder whether or not you were following it yourself.
Well, I am following it, obviously. I certainly wanted Wilders to win, and what I'm seeing already, though, is that the gap between him and the current PM's party is very, very much wider than the pre-election polls would have indicated. The polls going into the election indicated they were almost tied, and so there are grounds there to suspect that the globalists have tinkered with the Dutch elections the same way they tinkered with the Scottish independence referendum, the same way they tried to tinker with the Brexit vote and failed miserably. And I'm not the only one who is out there saying there are reasons to examine this election for fraud.
Yeah, and I was thinking the same thing. I mean, it was funny how it ended up so far apart, such a big spread. Considering that they were supposed to be neck and neck kind of thing, and this, he was going through the other candidate was going through some legal battles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In regards to his wife getting a new
that's down in France. You're mixing your elections together.
That's down in France.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm missing,
all right, gotta let you go.
Yeah,
gotta let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here now. Fritz in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael and everyone. I'm looking at United States Code, Title 26, U.S. Code, Section 5845, Definitions. For the purpose of this chapter, a firearm means 1. A shotgun having a barrel or barrels of less than 18 inches in length, or a weapon made from a shotgun in such a weapon as modified has an overall length of less than 26 inches. 3, a rifle having a barrel or barrels of less than 16 inches. 4, a weapon made from a rifle, if such weapon is modified, has an overall length of less than 26 inches. Or a barrel's less than 16 inches. 5, any other weapon as defined in subsection E, and then you'd have to read the whole section. 6, a machine gun. 7, any silencer as defined in section 921 of Title 18. And 8, a destructive device, which is another defined term in this section you'd have to read. The term firearm shall not include an antique firearm or any device other than a machine gun or destructive device which, although designed as a weapon, the Secretary finds by reason of the date of its manufacture, value, design, and other characteristics is primarily a collector's item and is not likely to be used as a weapon.
Okay.
And you can read the definition of machine gun, rifle, shotgun, and so on.
We've already done that.
So common guns like pistols, rifles, and shotguns are not firearms.
Well, I think you're misinterpreting the context of that law, because they're describing firearms that are banned to the American people, sawed-off shotguns and so forth and so on. Here's the important point, okay? An AR-15 semi-automatic sporting rifle is legal to own. You can go down to the store and you can buy one as long as you don't have a criminal record. And the only difference between what you buy at the gun store and what you get at guns80.com is you build it yourself, because it's fun to do that. And that is really where their business is. People are buying and building guns just so they can say, I actually built that. Okay? And that's the real difference. This is a legal weapon to own. And under BATF rule, okay? So the fact is, it is a legal weapon to own. All they're arguing about is the fact that you are building it yourself instead of allowing some gun company to make money by selling you one that's already built.
Yes, and your guest seemed to mention that where they drew the line on what was a firearm, and I'm reading from this statute, and a rifle, and a shotgun, and a pistol are not firearms.
Okay, you're confused about what he's saying. What he's talking about is BATF rules that say what is the legal firearm. And in the case of the AR-15, it's the lower receiver. That is the one part that must have a serial number if it is manufactured for sale. That's the one that has the paper trail from manufacturer to gun store to final registered owner. That's legally the firearm. Everything else is a spare part. That's the context of what
I don't think that's... Title 26 doesn't...
No, we're talking about the BATF... We're talking about... Okay. All right, thank you very much. You don't want to listen? Actually, if you go to guns80.com, there's a whole section that lays out the law on this situation. And when Joe was talking about what is the firearm, he's talking about the legal definition of what component forms the firearm. In this day and age of guns that are built out of numerous parts, something has to be the part that is tracked. Now, when the CIA was manufacturing military weapons in Arkansas in the 1980s to smuggle down to Nicaragua, that was the part that was being manufactured in Arkansas, lower receivers without serial numbers. That's what made it a crime to do. Everything else can be bought as a spare part. You can go on all over the internet. There's all kinds of places that will sell you the various parts. And one of the fun things about that AR design is how easy it is to modify. and put accessories on. And one of these days I'll get around to finishing mine, and mine is configured, as I said before. It's going to be a target rifle. Very long barrel, very nice scope. I want to put holes in paper with a rifle that I built myself. I've done it before. It's very, very rewarding. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we're going to come on back. We've got one more phone call waiting, and then we've got a bunch of stuff happening that we need to talk about. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take another phone call. Russ in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, I spoke earlier today at the very beginning about Fukushima. Okay, since that time, I have gone to Wikipedia, and at least Wikipedia says that after this problem occurred within a short time, they did start to use seawater because they knew seawater would destroy the reactor. They didn't want to do it initially, but they are apparently, if you believe Wikipedia, then the seawater is being used to cool that reactor. They couldn't possibly get enough water from any other source.
Well, I'm glad we now actually have the facts on that matter because, I mean, my understanding goes back to shortly after the accident when they said they were trying to use fresh water to save the reactors, but obviously at this point, the reactors are way beyond saving. But you're certainly right about the chlorine. Seawater is corrosive, especially when it gets as hot as it appears to be down in the lower depths of those ruined reactors. The fact of the matter is nothing they're doing is working. That $400 million ice wall still leaks, which makes perfect sense because the debris that is washing out from underneath those reactors is hot enough to melt the ice. They're going through the motions of trying to look like they're dealing with this thing. They can't. There's no taking it back. All Japan is doing now is trying to convince everybody that it's over and done with. It's okay to move back on in and start farming and working the area. I can't imagine anybody being dumb enough to buy one of those homes, no matter, even if they're giving them away for free. It would be foolish
to... Fukushima could be the most earth-shaking event since the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
It is certainly the worst industrial accident in history. It is the worst nuclear accident in history, and there will be no taking it back.
What I believe is going on is, look, the chloride attacks. There are only really two good metals for chloride. Look, I'm a chemical engineer, not a nuclear engineer. Cast iron is excellent for seawater use, and also a thing called admiralty metal, which has 10% copper.
Yes.
But
what about manganese? Nickel, what about manganese bronze?
Manganese what?
Manganese bronze. It's the alloy they use for like the screws on the Queen Mary, for the propellers.
I don't know. Manganese is a fairly reactive metal. I don't know, but,
okay.
But I'm sure they don't have manganese bronze in that nuclear reactor. It's zirconium. It's various grades of stainless. Stainless is full of nickel and chrome. And what is happening? The chloride is attacking these metals and making salts. Manganese salts, iron salts, chrome salts, nickel salts. And when people smell the ocean, you smell the salt in the ocean. That's because you're inhaling very small amounts of sodium chloride and potassium chloride. I believe the same thing will take place. In other words, this is not just going to pollute the ocean; it'll pollute the atmosphere. That's what I'm saying. That's my basic pitch.
Okay. Well, my question would be, if you have chlorine and it's reacting with these metals in the reactor, how contaminated are these salts themselves going to be? It sounds like they're not chemically binding with the actual radioactive isotopes themselves.
Well, no, the radioactive, whether an element has chemical characteristics and radioactive characteristics, and the two are relatively independent. Cesium-137 as an example, it's a gamma emitter, it will react for sure as hell with chloride. So the fact that it's radioactive does not change its chemical characteristics. The two are actually independent. So what I'm suggesting, and I have no data whatsoever to prove it, is that some of these salts are being thrown into the atmosphere for wave action and everything else, and that a certain percentage of the stuff that goes to the atmosphere can come down in rain. I don't know. I suspect someone is eventually going to check it out.
Well, it makes sense. It makes sense here because I'm back to monitoring our radiation here on the island of Oahu. The only equipment I have is able to measure the air for beta and gamma only. I can't afford an alpha, a quality alpha detector. But the radiation has remained at a very high, well, it's high but not dangerous, but it's definitely elevated over the normal base radioactivity you get from living on congealed lava. So there's definitely still some air contamination. I'm getting emails from somebody in California who says they're getting even higher readings than I am, and apparently they're starting to notice some very odd behavior in their vegetable garden. So who knows?
Well, Hawaii is fortunate. There's a word for it, where the mixing depth, because it's on the ocean. There's a typical breeze. There's the trade winds, all that kind of stuff. So in Hawaii, in general, you get a good mixing. So if there are any pollutants in Hawaii, they'll be thrown away to the ocean.
Well, because of the North Pacific Gyre Current, most of the radiation from Fukushima missed us to the north on its way to the west coast of North America. Anyway, thank you for the information. I hate to be abrupt, but we're running out of time, and we've got a lot of stuff to cover before the top of the hour. But thank you for the update on that and the clarification on the salt water and the dangers of the chlorine. And I don't know what else they're going to do. They really can't do anything. The technology just isn't there to deal with this problem. Thank you very much for the phone call, Russ. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to computers and security, there is a new bill that's been introduced to the House of Representatives that will allow your telecom provider to sell your personal internet history to whoever wants to buy it. I presume marketing companies at the top of it, but anybody who's trying to build a profile of you, even including front companies that are looking for information you can be blackmailed with. And I think it's extraordinarily reckless. And apparently on the 7th of this month, Senator Jeff Flake and 22 other co-sponsors introduced, apparently this is a Senate bill, not a House bill, or there's one in both. Senate Joint Resolution 34, which would use the Congressional Review Act to strip away privacy protections voted in by the FCC last year and allow your telecom company to sell your private internet history to whoever the highest bidder. And apparently one day later, Representative Marsha Blackburn introduced the House version of the bill. So privacy is definitely gone in this country. And I'll tell you what's going to happen. People are going to stop shopping online. They're going to stop browsing online, other than for news. This is actually going to be harmful for the economy. Now, Elon Musk is out there, and he is very concerned about growing artificial intelligence. Apparently, Google's latest experiment has reached the point where it can learn on its own without humans needing to program it anymore. Elon Musk is saying artificial intelligence is the demon. It is here now, and he's forming a new company to try and counter this development of making organic man technically obsolete. Now, I don't think that's really going to happen, because you can have a society full of robots and artificial intelligence machines taking over jobs, but then these machines aren't going to go out and spend any money that they're making at the stores, are they? And that is really where this all starts to lock up. This is why when I go down to Home Depot, I will not use the self-service checkout. They've got them now at Sam's. I won't use them there. I'm not going to use the ordering kiosks or the robots that they're bringing into places like Wendy's, even though I love Wendy's hamburgers. Because if we do not give our working and middle-class people the ability, the right to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries, the economy is going to lock up. To keep the economy going, some of that wealth that is accumulated at the top of the pyramid has to be recycled back down to the bottom to keep the system going. And it's really kind of weird, because every time I try and point this out, I get all these hate emails saying, what are you, some kind of a communist? No, actually, I'm a capitalist, old-style capitalist. But capitalism can't work with this much wealth inequality. It just can't. Period. End of discussion. Now then, over in California, just weeks after the Oroville Dam crisis, and now they're dealing with the revelation that there was visible damage to the spillway before that crisis hit, but apparently they've already found damage in another key California reservoir. This is at the Clifton Court forebay. This is a 2-mile wide reservoir that stores water for the State Water Project pumping plant in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta near Tracy. And they have found damage to the intake structure. Repairs are going to begin Wednesday. They are assuring all of their downstream people that water service will not be interrupted. But I guess they're finally starting to pay attention to some of this cracking, decaying infrastructure. Here is an interesting story out of Natural News. Are patients dying from chemo and not cancer itself? Apparently somebody, for the first time ever, researchers decided to look at how many cancer patients were dying within the first 30 days of chemotherapy treatment. And this kind of a short lifespan following chemotherapy would suggest the medication is most likely the cause of death rather than the cancer itself. And they did a study of about 30,000 case histories, and they found 1,300 people died within 30 days of beginning chemotherapy's regimen. It is a controlled poison. The theory behind chemotherapy is we're going to put these highly toxic chemicals in your body, and we're going to give you just enough to kill the cancer, but not enough to kill you. Except, of course, that everybody responds to medication differently. This is a classic case of a one-size-fits-all treatment doesn't really fit all. And this is kind of personal for me because my mother passed away from cancer. And to this day, I don't know if she died of the cancer itself or of the combined chemotherapy radiation treatments they hit her with. Those just ate her away. We all know what radiation can do to people. It's all about selling product, all about selling product. Now, if you use ibuprofen over the counter, you may want to start rethinking that. We're seeing this article. This is in the Independent Great Britain. There is now a call to restrict sales on ibuprofen over the counter because apparently researchers have discovered ibuprofen increases the risk of cardiac arrest by 31%. If you're taking ibuprofen on a regular basis, your risk of cardiac arrest is 1/3 higher than it would be otherwise. How did this stuff ever get approved to be put on the market? By the way, if you're taking ibuprofen, you cannot drink alcohol with it. I had a very good friend almost lost her liver because she was on ibuprofen. Apparently, the doctor didn't tell her this was a bad idea. Was drinking wine, all of a sudden liver problems. Serious, serious, life-threatening liver problems on that. Now, here's a new story. This one's coming out of Zero Hedge. Apparently, there are some newly unsealed court documents that were released just recently. And it shows a coordinated campaign between Monsanto and the Environmental Protection Agency to attack and discredit anybody saying that glyphosate might be harmful to human health. Now, Monsanto was never able to actually prove Roundup does not cause cancer, and as we know since then, the World Health Organization has declared it a probable carcinogen. California is going to include glyphosate on their mandated list of cancer-causing chemicals. But apparently the Environmental Protection Agency went along with Monsanto, even though Monsanto could not prove it safe, on a campaign to kill and discredit independent cancer research, including that conducted by the World Health Organization itself. And that's how glyphosate won its EPA approval. It makes money. As long as it's making money, that's all that's really important in the United States. We're making money here. Now, as you know, they just had this huge blizzard up in New England, and already the corporate media is saying, well, you know, it really wasn't all that bad, and you know, they're still cleaning. But it wasn't all that bad. It's not proof that global warming isn't real here. And so we're having this other article. This came out of Investment Watch blog. Once again, the National Weather Service has been caught rigging the storm data. It's all lies, fraud, and deception. Now, here is a very alarming article coming out of agreenroadjournal.com. And it's talking about the growing problem with the deep Pacific Ocean. And they're describing it as broken or dead, devoid of life for thousands of miles where it used to be filled with life. Tide pools from Mexico to British Columbia are sterilized and devoid of 99% of the life forms that used to be found. I remember as a kid in Southern California going down to, or even when younger in New England, going down to the beach, going to the tide pools and finding starfish and all this other stuff. It was a lot of fun. And they're saying it appears to be linked to the tsunami washout from Japan, as well as the ongoing, continuing leakage of radiation from Fukushima. And there's not a thing that they can do about it. Corporate media isn't paying a lot of attention to Fukushima. They can't solve the problem, therefore it's not a big deal. They can't make money off of it. They can't make political points. Corporate media only reports on disasters the government can do something about. They can't do a thing about this one. Apparently, up in the Dakota Access Pipeline area, the Native American tribe asked for a temporary stay on the flow of oil in that pipeline. The U.S. federal judge has rejected that. The oil will be going on. Now, as you know, down in Africa, there's a major problem with poaching, and apparently as more and more African migrants come to Europe, they're bringing that practice with them. Apparently at the Parc Zoologique de Thory outside Paris, a southern white rhinoceros was shot 3 times and killed, one horn sawn off by attackers, because rhino horns are big business in certain parts of the world. The second horn was only partially sawn, which suggests that the perpetrators were almost caught. But they're killing the animals in the zoos to get those rhino horns. It's believed in some parts of the world that ground-up rhinoceros horn is better than Viagra and other ridiculous superstitions. Now, again, this is on the same level as the people who slaughtered all the American buffalo just for the hides. Weren't interested in the meat. They should have been. It's actually very healthy meat, healthier than beef. We'll be right back with the last segment of our program today. And aloha America, welcome back to our show, last segment of our program on this Wednesday hump day. And another bizarre story here. This is coming out of the vaccinereaction.org. And they're telling the story of a science teacher, Timothy Sullivan. Back in 2015, he was approaching public health nurses, administering vaccines to students at his school in Waterford, Ontario, Canada, and asked whether they had informed the students about the potential risks of the shots. And he pointed out that teenagers, under the law, were required to give informed consent, and the nurses, therefore, were under an obligation to make sure the students were fully informed. Well, apparently he tried to do the same thing more recently, and now he's under threat of discipline by the school administration. Don't you dare go on out there and tell those nurses to tell the students about the possible risks. It's totally corrupt. $30 billion a year business has a lot of money to buy their way with the American people, or in this case, the Canadian people. Canada is going down the dark road to dictatorship the same as we are. All right, apparently there has been what may be an assassination attempt on Trump insider Roger Stone. And apparently he was on his way to a speech in Orlando. His car was T-boned by a car coming out of nowhere, and he points out the windshield was so darkly tinted you could not see who was driving the car. And the airbags went off, and apparently the attacking car then drove off. Hit and run. And at this point, I am not ready to say, oh, he's just being paranoid. Even paranoids have enemies. And anybody who is supportive of Donald Trump right now is a target. Now, here's a very alarming story. Just came up in the Daily Mail. The U.S. prepares to incapacitate Kim USS Carl Vinson carrying huge fleet of fighter jets arrives in South Korea as military sources reveal plan to remove Jong-un's war chiefs. They're not even keeping up the pretense this is a drill. I mean, it's mentioned further on in, but from the headline, it sounds like, yeah, the invasion of North Korea is on. South Korea's Yonhap news agency claims the heightened military presence is part of a plan to decapitate the North Korean leadership. At least in South Korea, in their media, they seem to feel this is the real deal. All they need is a false flag to set it all off, and based on that other article, they're telegraphing that North Korea, or somebody pretending to be North Korea, is going to open fire at one of the ships in that military exercise. And it will be on. Rather sad story going back to the economic news. New figures show that people born after 1983 are more likely to have borrowed money from friends and family or sold their possessions in order just to pay their bills. A survey by broker Norton Finance has revealed that over a third of 18 to 34-year-olds are going without food and heating as stalling salaries and rising living costs turn making ends meet into a nightmare for young people. This is not a working economy. And there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday, on the Republic Broadcasting Network. So please make a point of taking everything you learn here or at the website, share it with everybody that you know. We are literally in a war between the corporate media establishment and the American people. We have to win this thing. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.